AI Mentors is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting and networking needs. Our podcast, AI Mentors, brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI Mentors cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career.
You're listening to AI Mentors. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Thomas Vincent. Thomas is the head of data science for Getty Images. Thomas, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
No, our pleasure. So let's start, Thomas. Give us a little bit of background of yourself, how you got involved in technology. Talk us through your career, some of the interesting roles you've held along the way, leading up to your current position, leading the data science function here for Getty.
Sure. So my background originally is actually in mathematics and physics. That's what I did my undergraduate in. After graduating from that, I actually decided to stay in academia, and I took on PhD studies in the field of biostatistics. And what I was trying to do there is actually applying some sophisticated statistical methodologies to actually try and predict the three-dimensional structure of proteins. So in essence, it was the protein folding problem that we were trying to work on. And that was a really, really interesting time because I had the opportunity to be embedded within a biochemistry lab, yet my PhD advisor was actually a statistics professor. So very early on, I had the opportunity to not only work from a theoretical standpoint, but had to interface a lot with very sort of practical data scientists who were chemists at the time and didn't necessarily have a formal background in statistics. After graduating from my PhD back in 2011, I actually moved to New York, where I took up a postdoctoral research position. So I was a research scientist at the Weill Cornell Medical College on the Upper East Side in New York. And in this case, I was placed in the Genomics Center, where I worked with a number of surgeons and doctors and other computational biologists. And here, a lot of my work was mostly focused on understanding subtle genetic differences between different population groups. And more specifically, one of the questions we're trying to answer is why you had some groups of people that could smoke for 10, 50 years and never get any kind of diseases, whereas other people could perhaps smoke for 1 or 2 years and contract COPD or lung cancer, and really trying to tease out what could be the sort of natural or genetic variations that could explain for that. I stayed in that position for 2 or 3 years. Around that time, 2014, was when really the sort of data science wave was really sort of taking the industry by storm. At this point in academia, I kind of reached sort of a bifurcation where I had the opportunity to either stay there and go for an assistant professorship position, or actually leave academia and go into industry. And for a variety of reasons that I'd be happy to discuss, I actually decided to go into industry.
Excellent. Well, listen, thank you for that background. Very interesting. So talking then about your current role, Getty Images, many people will recognize the brand, but from speaking to you in previous conversations, you guys are doing some incredibly interesting stuff with the use of data science. So it'd be good to get some detail of your role, what you're tasked with, and how you're using AI and data science within Getty.
So I've been at Getty Images for just about 2 years now. And originally I was brought onto the company to really build out the data science team within the marketing organization. And so we've effectively grown from 0 to 9 now. So it's been very, very interesting, not only understanding what the various applications for data science at Getty Images, but also having the opportunity to build out a team and really sort of have a significant impact on the organization as a whole. What was really appealing to me was the content that we have, and more specifically, the fact that we were sitting on a treasure chest of data, which was how customers are searching for our content, how they're interacting with our content, and what they're doing with our content. And to me, there was this interplay of behavior, what people are interested in at this current point, and what they're searching for, which was really, really appealing. And so from a data perspective, you start running into all kinds of challenges related to big data, search, targeting, personalization, and so on and so on.
Yeah, very interesting. I know when you and I spoke previously, you gave some insight into some of the exciting projects that are coming down the pipeline. Yeah. I think it'd be great to learn a little bit more about that. So people who are listening who similar to myself or new to brand can now see what you guys are doing with innovation driven by data science and how it's going to impact the customer?
There's a number of projects that we work on. At the beginning, and I think a lot of people who may have been involved in data science or data engineering may relate to that. Some of the work that the team originally did was to actually sort of rebuild a lot of legacy systems. So in some cases, it wasn't so much as innovation, it was more about modernization. And that's probably what kept us busy for perhaps the first 7 to 8 months, where we spent a lot of time sort of migrating away from older technology stacks to more modern ones. And it's only once we had the opportunity to finish that work that we really started going down the path of innovation. And in that case, I could sort of name a few very interesting projects for us. Within marketing, we have the digital marketing team, for example, which is a team of about 20 people who are essentially responsible for evaluating the performance of a variety of digital campaigns, and based on that, making decisions on whether they should be bidding more or less, and essentially optimizing the performance. And what we found is that like this team of 20 people had to manually track a combination of 20 different digital channels over 100 countries for a variety of different metrics, to the point where they effectively had to track over 100,000 time series on a weekly basis, which even for a team of 20 people, it just completely is a non-tractable problem. And so one of the interesting projects that we're working on at this point is kind of based on 3 different concepts. The first one is alerting. So we have one data scientist whose job is currently to implement this whole system, which is responsible for tracking the behavior of these time series on a daily basis and effectively alerting the relevant stakeholder as soon as we see a specific metric in a specific country on a specific channel trending down. And so that really enables that team to become a lot more proactive on how they want to like address certain issues, and really sort of provides this sort of needle in a haystack kind of solution where people don't have to worry about finding where the problem is, and we actually provide them the information on where the problem is, and they can focus on solving that problem. And similarly, they had to do exactly the same thing, forecasting. So they effectively had to like forecast performance for a lot of the 100,000 of these time series, and they were doing a lot of that work manually. So we've automated a lot of this process as well. And when you start thinking about alerting and forecasting, you start understanding what impacts these time series. So then we were able to like provide even more information on, hey, here's how spend actually influences this specific market as opposed to others, and they can start making more informed decisions around optimization and so on. So that's one very, very specific example where we've kind of helped them a lot. A lot of other projects that we've been involved in is around targeting and personalization, meaning obviously in a completely sort of private and secure way within the boundaries of the law. We analyze customer behavior and based on that, identify the best message to communicate over to them and when to communicate that to them and what we should be communicating to them, so that for different customer segments, we're effectively targeting them with the right promotion or the right content that they should be looking to download and so on.
You and I have spoke previously about, what you enjoy most about working in Getty Images, and I think it would be good to get you to elaborate on that point, because from our perspective, when speaking to data scientists, they want to work large data sets, innovation, and business impact. And from speaking to you, you're clearly loving your role here because of those points. But it would be great just to hear about what you're most excited about in your role and some of the projects that are coming down the line.
Yeah, so I think what's the most exciting right now is that we actually officially entered a phase where obviously we communicate a lot with different business stakeholders to gather priorities, but the team has actually finally entered a phase where we're able to drive some projects and initiatives. So while we respond a lot to various requests from like C-level executives and other business stakeholders in terms of prioritization, we're also getting to an interesting stage where we can start pushing forward some of our own initiatives, which is very, very exciting. To me, what I find really, really, really exciting is when you have the ability to leverage and surface a new data point or a new sort of intelligence score, something like this, to people, and they had no idea it was even possible. And that to me is always sort of the most satisfying item, when normally they would either be unaware that this was possible, unaware that we could actually collect this data, had no idea that it could be surfaced into the system that they're used to utilizing. Being able to sort of break down those boundaries and silos between the data that we have and how people make decisions is great. Yeah.
So when you joined, it was very much a new function, and you were tasked with building it from scratch, and that presents a lot of challenges along the way. You've now found yourself where you've built a high-performing team with some incredible data scientists. What were your learns along the way, and more importantly, what do you look for as you build and scale an effective data science team?
Very, very on, I knew exactly what I was looking for when building that team. A lot of that was based on opinions and experience that I had gathered from past positions and seeing what had worked, what had failed. I'm also fortunate enough to be part of a fairly large network of data scientists, and I actually reached out to a number of people who had built teams before to actually ask their opinion, understand what their learnings from what works, what doesn't work, and the type of profile you should be looking for when building out a team. And something that I was very, very, very sort of both aware of and really wanted to make push on was to hire data scientists that had some degree of comfort with software engineering principles. As in, I really wanted to have data scientists that could not only be able to sort of communicate effectively, but also be held responsible for end-to-end data science projects. And that meant gathering requirements, understanding where they should be focusing to maximize business impacts, implementing the ETL pipeline if required, having enough machine learning background to implement their own predictive models if needed, and then integrating this into various production systems. And so that was something I was really looking for automatically, and is actually kind of a requirement to get into the team. I think if a lot of listeners may be thinking that I'm looking for a unicorn out there, actually they do exist. They are here. I would add that in a lot of cases with our team, there's two different ways of deploying to productions. There's sort of more batch systems, and then there's truly having a machine learning model in production, completely embedded with your website that has to respond with very, very low latency to customer actions and so on. And I distinguish the two, and I think the latter, which requires much more sort of thorough engineering work, is definitely not something I would expect a data scientist in my team. In that case, we would actually work with the technology or engineering organization to make that happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. They are out there. You've hired them. I've seen them many times. I think for data scientists who are listening, it's never too late to embark on improving your coding abilities, because it will benefit you long term.
Right.
Focusing on this topic and getting some further insight into the individuals who you've hired and who've been successful, is there any common denominator other than their ability to have the fundamentals, the communication skills, the coding? What can one do to improve their chances of securing a role here, whether it's preparation, interview style, or what is it that you look for as being that X factor?
So we have a range of people in the team. Some people have a fair amount of experience as software engineers. Other people have just experience as data scientists. Other people are actually just have more of a background in terms of the BI side, being data analysts, and others actually straight out of graduate school. So there's really a range of different profiles. To be very, very basic and blunt, during the interview process, we do a lot of things, but at the end of the day, what we're looking for is smart people we want to work with, and often the rest takes care of itself.
Yeah.
Right? And obviously, I'm really, really sort of dumbing it down there, but those are the two main things. After that, we're always going to put an emphasis on coding skills, and that's not just being able to implement machine learning models, but everything that comes around that. Like, are you comfortable with, basic engineering principles? Can you write clean code that's reproducible and so on? And for these reasons, often what we'll do is ahead of an on-site interview, we'll actually send a sort of a coding test, which tests a variety of different skill sets for the candidate. I know these coding tests can be slightly controversial. So, many people have mixed feelings about those, and I understand why. They can be a bit of a time suck. People don't often get feedback off of them. But we use these coding skills tests to essentially rule out a lot of the basic questions that we would otherwise ask during the on-site interview, so that if they come back to us with a high quality test, we know we don't need to worry about asking those specific basic questions during an on-site interview, and actually focus on more of the sort of tangible intangibles that are like much more important for the role. And so really what we're looking for here is, again, like clean code. Are you doing your basic sanity checks on the data that we're sending you? Are you thinking about how the business would actually try and solve this problem? Are you implementing your machine learning models correctly, and so on and so on?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. I think you're assessing for the role requirements, and some data science positions may not require an ability to write production quality code, but at Getty it does. Flipping it slightly, you acknowledge that the type of team that you're building requires somebody who is a bit more complete in their abilities. Those individuals are difficult to find, but they are out there. Equally speaking, everybody wants those types of people. So you've been very successful in attracting talented people to come here. If I'm a top data scientist and I'm sitting having a coffee with you, and I'm also speaking to 5 other companies, what is it about Getty that would make it unique? What are they going to get from working here? And help people understand why you love your role here as much as you do.
I would probably summarize into 3 bullet points. We have an incredible amount of very interesting data that ranges both from content, behavior, and customer, as well as financial. The second bullet point is that data hasn't really been leveraged or used, and therefore there's a huge amount of opportunities for low-hanging fruits and business impacts. And the third bullet point is that there's buy-in from leadership, as in the leadership team at Getty Images has explicitly stated that they're willing to increase their investment in data science and AI ML, and that they believe in the impact that this can have for the business. And I think for me, these are like the 3 pillars you should be looking for as a data scientist if you want to have a true impact.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I would add is the environment and the culture, because I'm here in your office, spoken to you many times, and it's a good place to be. Thinking about yourself, how you've built a successful team, you've interviewed dozens, if not triple figures of candidates. Speaking to potential candidates who may meet you in the future, what can an individual do to better prepare themselves pre-interview, and how to conduct the most effective interview? Any bit of insight or guidance or advice of things that you look for and that would help a candidate stand out?
I'm going to break this up into 2 sections because I think I handle these situations differently. It will depend on whether the candidate has no experience as a data scientist prior to this, or whether the candidate does have experience as a data scientist. And obviously we're talking about slightly different roles, but I look for different things and different patterns there. If the candidate has no experience as a data scientist, there's a few very, very key indicators I look for. The first one is I actually go out there and look for any evidence of their work. And by that, I'll always go on the GitLab or GitHub repo if they have one. I'll always check if they have a blog, if they have one. And usually the presence of one of these 2 things is always going to be a big positive for me, especially if they have like a blog where they've taken the time to go off and identify a problem that they're interested in, taken the effort to actually collect the data that they needed and find an original solution to that problem and actually write something up. And for me, that shows like a high level of motivation, but also intelligence in terms of like, oh, I was interested in solving this problem, and I proactively went out there to actually figure out how to do it. And I mentioned this specifically because I find that very, very different to someone who, for example, has done a Kaggle competition, where in that case, it's a completely different workflow where you're given the problem to solve, you're given the data, and then you just have to maximize predictive performance. And I think that has a lot of value as well, but I specifically look for things like the blog and GitLab and as a type of track record. After that, during the interview, obviously, I'm going to caution you on the basics if you don't have that more of a formal background in data science, but I'm also going to be really evaluating your problem-solving ability and your track record of having solved problems in the past, and I'll be looking for that specifically. Yeah.
Excellent.
And if you do have a lot of experience working as a data scientist, in that case, the bar will obviously be a lot higher as well. And the one single thing I'll be looking for there is concrete examples of having deployed your work into production, and also the ability to explain to me in ways that explain to me like I'm a 5-year-old, what was the impact of that work to the business? And if you can quantify that in a monetary amount, a human amount, that's always going to be a big positive, because the last thing we'll be looking for is a data scientist that just writes a little bit of models and then just ships it out to someone and never knows what happens to it. I'm looking for people who want to be highly involved in the whole process. Yeah.
It's probably the most important question that one can ask when assessing a candidate's suitability. We're asking this day in, day out for our clients and helping them assess a candidate's suitability. So I think it can't be understated the importance of being able to articulate the value add and the business impact you've had in a previous role. I think it's incredibly important.
And my general feedback is I see a lot of resumes where there's a lot of different tools and methods and libraries that are listed on there. I will say that these rarely have an impact on me, but if someone puts in a link to their GitHub repo or their blog where there's some like concrete work that has been done, that will far outweigh anything I see on a resume, including academic or technical background.
Okay, that's an important one.
If I could see your work and it's good, I don't really care whether you have a PhD, a master's, or you've dropped out of high school. Yeah.
Excellent. One final bonus question. If you were to do it all over again, coming out of academia, knowing what you know now, looking at the change in landscape, ever-evolving landscape in data science, what would be the key things that you would focus on to advance your career if you were coming into industry now?
There would be a couple of things. I think the first one is really keeping an eye out for data engineering. And by that, I mean, there's a lot of focus on the machine learning component and how to like implement machine learning models and how to validate them. And that's obviously central and key to the work that a data scientist does. But to not forget about what comes before and after it, meaning you need to collect that data, you need to clean it, you need to process it. And that's a muscle that comes with practice and training. Like when you gradually get better and better and faster, just sort of like sniffing out things that may be wrong in the data. And it's so important to get that right because it's the old adage of garbage in, garbage out. If you have bad data going into your model, you're going to get a bad model. And it's even worse if you don't know that your data is bad and you're making predictions of your model, because then that could open a whole can of worms. And the second item is once you've got your predictions, understanding what to do with this. So get a bit familiar with how to sort of like implement APIs, understand how to sort of actually hook up to APIs from different systems and so on. And again, that's more about like getting some basic engineering sort of chops underneath your wings on that front. So that's the sort of key component I want to highlight. I think that the ability to explain your work, whether in oral or written form, is really undervalued and so important. And I understand it's something that's hard to practice, but just always making sure that you don't forget about that. And also as a data scientist, sometimes you have to make a decision about what kind of data scientist you want to be. There's so much work happening right now on the sort of AI ML scene, which is sort of like obscenely advanced and complicated, like neural network architectures that allow you to do really incredible things. And that's a specific flavor of data science in my view. And then there's more traditional machine learning methods that more applicable to other types of data sets, and getting a good overview of what's going on across the landscape and deciding where your focus is going to be. Is it going to be more on the business side? Is it going to be more on the infrastructure production side? Is very important as well. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Thomas. This has been incredibly insightful, amazing things happening at Getty, and a lot of good tips and advice for people listening. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following. AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.